So for those of you with a really tiny bank balance, a little bit like me, you might be in the market for a second-hand budget smartphone in 2022, one with some pretty good specs for a pretty low asking price. Well, that's where the Motorola Edge from 2020 comes in. This boasts some really amazing specs, including a giant OLED display, triple camera system and a large 4,500 mAh battery. But of course it is nearly 2 years old to the day, so I think it's time to have a relook at the Motorola Edge in 2022. So let's start by talking about the Motorola Edge's headline feature, and that is of course that big display. It's a whopping 6.7 inch curved OLED display with a 90Hz refresh rate and full HD resolution. It's protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 5 and supports HDR10 content. Movies and games look absolutely amazing on this display, and with the addition of stereo speakers means that content consumption is very enjoyable. Scrolling through the stock UI is very smooth thanks to the 90Hz refresh rate, which you can have set to 90Hz all the time or adaptive to save a little power. In the top left corner of the display is a high resolution 25 megapixel selfie camera with an f2.0 aperture. This produces nice detailed selfies binned down to 6.2 megapixels, and it can also record 1080p video at 30 frames per second. There is also HDR support on this camera too, so this should help in tricky lighting scenarios. The Motorola Edge also sports an in-display fingerprint scanner, which I found to be pretty responsive. It's probably not the fastest, of course, today with newer ones about, but I have nothing to compare it to as this is my first time experiencing this type of fingerprint scanner. But it's not too high as well, which is nice, and it lights up to help you find where it is. The screen tapers off nicely before reaching the slightly set back power button and volume rocker. I didn't find this an issue having the buttons as far back as they are. The left of the phone is free from any buttons or ports. Up top you have your second speaker built into the earpiece, and on the frame a microphone and SIM tray which houses your SIM card and micro SD card, something that was omitted from the more expensive Edge Plus. The bottom of the phone has your second speaker grille, USB-C port for charging up to 18 watts and a headphone jack. Flipping the phone over and you're greeted with a pretty clean plastic back aside from the Motorola logo, and then your triple camera setup up in the corner. This consists of a 64 megapixel f1.8 primary camera, a 16 megapixel f2.2 ultra-wide and an 8 megapixel f2.4 telephoto camera. Photos from all three cameras produce some really nice photos with nice detail and true to life colour. Photos from the 8 megapixel camera are upscaled to 16 megapixels, but this doesn't seem to do much to improve the image quality. One thing I did notice occasionally when I was flipping to the telephoto camera of the Motorola Edge, when you press the button on the screen to change to that camera, it would immediately prompt me to switch to the macro camera because it didn't quite get the focus right, and I'd have to tap on the screen to sort the focus out. So that was a little glitch that I did find when switching just to the telephoto camera. It wasn't every time, and I didn't have the same issue when switching to the ultra-wide and then back to the main. So I don't know whether that's just something that happened with my unit that I've got here, but that's just something to bear in mind. Portrait shots are taken by default using the 8 megapixel telephoto camera, but you do actually have the option to flip back to the main camera to take those portrait shots with the help of the time of flight sensor as well, and these produce some really great photos with excellent background blur, so you've got no issues here. As for nighttime photography with the Motorola Edge, photos come out as expected at this sort of budget range. They're not the best quality, there is plenty of noise, but you can kind of get a reasonable photo. But then there is the Motorola's night vision mode, which does help to brighten up the photos. It doesn't do a huge amount in terms of bringing out much more detail, but it just brightens up the scene to make them a little bit more usable. Video tops out at 4K at 30 FPS, and although there's no optical image stabilization available, there is electronic image stabilization which can be used with any camera on any shooting mode, which will help for those times where keeping a steady hand is a bit tricky. Now, while the quality of the video is pretty good, I did notice quite a bit of focus hunting when I was just moving the camera around different areas while I was filming, so that's just something to bear in mind. You can of course just press and hold on the screen to lock the focus, and that should help if this problem does come up. As for the battery on the Motorola Edge, you do get a large 4,500 mAh cell packed inside. This is slightly smaller than the 5,000 mAh batteries found in the majority of other budget handsets and also the Motorola Edge Plus, but this is still plenty enough to get you through a full day. I think I managed just over 6 hours of screen on time one day when I was out and about. That did include 4 hours of media streaming on Amazon Music and around 2.5 hours of Google Maps navigation. That is also along with the social media use that I generally was doing and a reasonable amount of camera use. So I think you would struggle to kill it in a day. But on the off chance that you do get 18 watt fast charging, which unfortunately isn't considered fast by today's standards. You'll get around 35% in about 30 minutes of charging, and a full charge will take around 2.5 hours. So yes, it isn't the fastest charging, but the fact that it will last you a full day, no worries, and then you plug it in overnight, I don't think that's going to be a huge issue. As for software, you get the typical stock Android experience that you do find on other Motorola devices. But unfortunately, the Motorola Edge is still stuck on the old Android 11. Whether it's going to get an Android 12 update, that's just something I'm going to have to wait and see. But on the bright side, it is running April 2022 security patch, so you are up to date with the security updates. But in terms of software, you are running the old Android 11. So that's just something to bear in mind if you are looking at getting this phone. And lastly, let's talk about performance. You get the 7nm Qualcomm Snapdragon 765G processor with either 4 or 6 gigabytes of LPDDR4X RAM. So performance for me has been absolutely flawless. I've not had any instances of anything stuttering or slowing down or anything like that. I did do a little bit of gaming on Need for Speed and that ran absolutely fine. So I think for an average person using this as their daily phone, I don't think you're going to have any issues with performance. And as for storage, you get either 128 or 256 gigabytes of expandable UFS 2.1 storage. So it's not the fastest read storage that you can get on the market, but it's absolutely fine. And the fact that you can add a micro SD card in as well to expand it, I think that's a plus as well. So in a nutshell, that's my look at the Motorola Edge from 2020. And I've got to say, I absolutely love this phone. It's absolutely amazing. You get a really stunning curved OLED display, and might I add, I haven't had any issues of the accidental touches that is usually found with curved displays, so I haven't had any issues with that at all. It's got a really capable camera system, all-day battery life. I think it's a really good buy. Now, I was quite lucky with this. I won this on a bid on eBay for about 88 quid. If you buy it now, a second-hand one, you're probably looking at around £200 for one, but I still think that is a pretty good buy for this phone. And especially in the hopes that it does get an Android 12 update, I think you'd do really well if you even picked one up for a couple of hundred quid. So given that it was about 500 when it released. But let me know in the comments what you think of the Motorola Edge. Are you rocking one now, or even another Motorola phone? Do let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what you're using. And thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the Tech Talk channel if you're interested in more videos like this on Motorola's. And I do have other phones, iPhones, and a couple of Samsungs and that sort of stuff on the channel as well. So do subscribe so you don't miss out on those videos. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.